arrange the key elements of my build in different fashions to make sure I'm always going down that middle path so that everything's the same in the end anyways. After I have figured out all the rearrangements based upon the various responses, that is when I start fleshing them out and getting them down very precisely until at the very, very end, I have an instruction set based upon food that I can execute every single time. Notice that the food instruction set that most people would describe as the build order was in fact the last final thing that we did when we were trying to make a build. And if all of this sounds super abstract and theoretical, don't worry, because I'm going to move on to part 3 right now, a super simple example that will demonstrate these ideas in real games. So suppose that you're a Terran player, and you've been having trouble against zergs. Here is a good idea for a build order. You would say to yourself, I'm having a lot of trouble against mutas and lurkers. Maybe I can kill that zerg player before he even gets them. I'll need some tanks to break down his sunkens at the front, and I'll need some medic marine to defend my tanks, and to run in once those sunkens are broken. And hopefully if I do this right, my zerg player will be dead before he even gets his layer tech off the ground. Great, our big idea is killing zerg before layer tech with a medic marine tank push. Now it's time to identify the key components to this build. What are all the things that are necessary to make this build work? I came up with a list of 6 key elements, which might seem like a lot, but it's a hell of a lot less than remembering every little instruction of some detailed build order that you find in a forum. So with that said, number 1, I need to get 2 barracks up so I have enough medic marine to defend my tanks. 2, I need a factory so I can get tanks with siege mode. 3, I need to get an academy so I can research stim and get my fire bats and my medics. 5, I need stim for my marines and fire bats because they're really not very good without it. And potentially 6 for maybe an engineering bay. Again, I want to list it because I might need it to build turrets to help bolster my push at his fronts because he might have mutalisks up. But there is a chance that my build is so good that it always crushes the zerg before he gets mutalisks, so I might not even need the engineering bay at all. So right now I have 6 elements listed. 1, I need a second barracks. 2, I need a factory. 3, I need an academy. 4 and 5 are siege and stim, and 6 is potentially this engineering bay. Alright, sweet. Right now, note that we haven't played a game yet. You're just a Terran player sitting alone in your room still devising a strategy. And it's important before you pick up and play that first game that you have some arrangement, some logical arrangement of these key elements in mind. The most logical thing would first to start with the easy part. I think I'm going to build my engineering bay last. Because again, I can't conceive of needing it early because he can't get mutalisks that fast. I mean, the whole point of the build is to kill him before he gets mutalisks. And the only reason to get it early would be to get some sort of attack or defense upgrade, but I don't think that'll be done in time for the tank push, so eBay would probably come last. Siege mode would obviously come second to last because I would want to start researching it at a time so that it would finish right when the tanks get to the front of his base. Stim would come next before that, so I would have stim by the time I get to his base, perhaps along the way. So right now, my last 3 elements in order are stim, siege, and an engineering bay. Now I have the 3 perhaps most important components of this build, which is the 2 factories, the barracks, and the academy. So continuing in this reverse direction, the academy seems like the last of those 3 that I'll get. Because I don't need the fire bats or the medics too early, because I can just hold my ramp with marines early on. And again, I'm not rushing to get stim early. So right now, the only things we have left are the 2 barracks and the factory. And the last 4 elements in order are going to be the academy, stim, siege mode, and an engineering bay. Now there's a little bit of debate about whether I should make that second barracks first or the factory first. If I make the 2 barracks first, I have a whole lot more units early on, and I'll have a lot more medic marine for when my tank push comes out, but it'll be a little bit slower. Likewise, if I get the factory first, my tank push will begin earlier, but I might not have as many units as I did before. The most important thing when you're faced with this sort of pro-con analysis and you're not sure is just to pick one. So right now, I am just going to pick 2 barracks first, followed by a factory, then my academy, then stim, siege mode, and an engineering bay. Now it's time for me as the Terran player to start playing the game. And what I'm going to do now is think about how to make these key elements relative to one another. I have an ordering for them, but I might say start siege mode when stim pack is half done or something like that. Or I might wait till my second barracks is finished before I even consider building my factory. Or I might be able to build my factory while my second barracks is making. All these sorts of things are what you flesh out through playing your build order several times in a row. Anytime you're doing a build in practice and you have these key elements all set up and everything seems to be going well, you'll still have a handful of big questions that you'll need to answer. So for example, with this fast tank push build, an excellent question is, should I be cutting marine production at any time? Should I stop making marines right at the start so I can get that factory up really fast and then go right back to pumping out marines from my 2 barracks? If you're unsure, again, just pick something and test it out. So for example, let's say I'm my Terran player and I start out, I get my 2 barracks, which is my first key element, and I make 5 marines before I get my factory started. And then I do everything as appropriate. I get my academy a little while afterwards, and then I get stim and siege mode and move out with my medic marine army once I have a tank or 2. I might get to his base and say to myself, wow, I'm a little bit late with this tank push. He already has his layer units, and I'm having trouble even getting the tank push started. Moreover, I seem to have way too many medic marine. Well, okay, duh. Earlier on, I clearly made too many marines, because I seem to have an excess, and that also appears to have delayed my tank push. So then I might cut back and say, okay, well, let me make only 1 marine. So let's say I've now done this build like 10 times or something like that. And everything is feeling really, really good. I have all my timing set out. I have this ordering of my key components. And when I build them is based on the other key elements. I don't say something like, make my academy at 30 food. I would say something like, make the academy when the factory is halfway done. As a result, I'll have a much easier sort of timing set should I encounter any sort of variation. Now with this in mind, let's think about the true power of using this key component build order set. Let's say, for some reason, that in those 10 games I practiced where everything was feeling really great, I was only playing against super standard zergs who did something like 3 hatch opening, then they gassed on 16 and went straight for a layer for mutilisks. Suppose that in my 11th game doing this build, I encounter some zerg player who's going 3 hatch mass zergling. He seems to have spent his first 100 gas on zergling speed, and I'm seeing very few drones being made out of those hatcheries. What do I do now? Well, the key idea of my build was to try to kill my opponent right before he got his layer units up and running, right before those mutilisks and lurkers came around. So, the appropriate way to respond then is not